we're both trying to beat the heat today. I've got the window open, so apologies for any errant noises. And yeah, I had to step out of this chair because I was just sweating on it like crazy. This leather chair.
Yeah, it's a sweltering one out there, folks. I don't know where it is out there in Radio Land, what the weather is like, but here, it's hot. This is like the hottest it gets around here. So,
hot time, summer in the city. It's like the start of Die Hard with a Vengeance.
Yes, exactly. Seminal summer film.
Oh yeah, big time. And seminal hangover film as well. Welcome everybody. It's Elwood City Limits, the episodic Arthur podcast, right in the middle of summer. Will Young here, along with Lucas Mancini. You know what? This is actually it's kind of a low-key episode in terms of things up front. I feel like we've been talking about putting up front a lot of things, but although I say that, but of course, as we've mentioned before on both varieties of podcast. It is time for the Best of Halifax nominations. Vote.thecoast.ca. Please nominate Elwood City Limits for Best Podcast in Halifax. And then not too long afterwards, about a month or so from now, we'll be getting into the voting of it all. So first is nominations. We've been doing this for the past couple of years, and I feel like every year we get a little bit closer. And hey, listen, we're up against some really good competition. We usually are. A lot of the podcasts that get nominated, I've personally listened to, and I think most of them are very good. And a lot of them deserve to be there. So, we're not asking for the moon here. We're not expecting to get gold or even silver. Those would both be great. But even if we could just place in bronze, I think that's a realistic goal. I think, considering that a lot of these podcasts have very heavy followings. We have a lot of listeners as well, but these they go beyond what I'm able to do for social media interactions and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, definitely nominate us. Vote.thecoast.ca, and we appreciate your nominations. If you've done that already and we haven't said so, thank you, and let us know when you do nominate us so we can thank you personally.
That's right, folks. We're an Arthur podcast first, but secondly, we are a Halifax podcast. I mean, we started this out by talking about the weather here today, so, Halifax is never far from our minds. And this is we're entering in the last week that you can nominate us. It ends the 24th of July. And yeah, folks, if you're wondering, okay, you guys get a bronze plaque, what does that even mean? First of all, we get recognition of our work of being the number one episodic Arthur podcast for years and years, and in my opinion, the number one family-friendly podcast in the HRM. But also, we get to go to a fancy party where they give us free cocktails. And folks, you best believe if we are even bronze, we're going to be at that fancy party and we're going to send you guys pics. Don't you want to see pics of me and Will happy with our free cocktail?
Right?
Rubbing elbows with the Halley famous folk. I know you want to see that, folks, and it's our guarantee that you will see those fun pictures if you go out there and nominate us and if we win.
Yes. So, one more time, vote.thecoast.ca to nominate us for Best Podcast in Halifax. Let's see how well we do this year. Okay, we just have one email up top here, elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. It's a little bit lighter this week, which is all good. And this one is from Anonymous, who wants to answer previous emailers' Eric's questions. They would have liked to see the late Robin Williams on Arthur. Of course, playing a genie and maybe even singing Friend Like Me if the mouse would have allowed it. No, I'm going to say they wouldn't. But Robin Williams on Arthur, that would have been super, super cool. That's a great answer. Others would include Tom Hanks, the late Betty White, Weird Al, Greta Thunberg, Billie Eilish, Mark Hamill, Christopher Lloyd, and Lin-Manuel Miranda. Greta Thunberg, I think, if she had come around a few years earlier, like if she was just born earlier or whatever, I think there's a very real chance she could have been on, if not Arthur, then a PBS Kids show.
Yeah, true. Like, they gave David Suzuki TV shows on CBC. I don't see why they couldn't do a similar thing with Greta Thunberg.
Yeah, and they may still, but it's just Greta Thunberg was definitely very in the news, a hot topic a couple of years ago. So when Arthur was still airing, so could have been. On a side note, what songs do you think go along with each character? For example, one of your old episodes, you discussed Muffy being a materialist, so her song would be Material Girl by Madonna. Since Binky likes wrestling, his song might be Eye of the Tiger. I'd be curious to know your takes on this. I feel like we have discussed this in the past, like character themes. I'm just trying to think who would be Loser by Beck. That came in my mind. That would probably be like...
Arthur!
You think? Yeah. Maybe like the Richard Cheese version or something. It's a little peppier. It's a little bit more of the worldly, quote unquote, worldly type music that Arthur purports. Brain would be either like math rock or like nerdcore. Like I'm thinking something like MC Front-A-Lot, maybe.
Exactly, MC Chris, MC Front-A-Lot.
Yeah.
That genre, or like, see, you can't say White and Nerdy by Weird Al because he's black.
It's true.
So it doesn't apply. But I agree that it would be some lyrics about how nerdy they are. You know, spitting rhymes about your D&D campaign and the like. What about Buster? What do you think for Buster?
Buster's ska. I think Buster's the most.
He's either ska
adjacent
or
of them.
like I'm like, okay, who is the artist who like makes music about like UFOs and monsters and stuff like that? Maybe like Rob Zombie, you know what I mean? Like he loves
little
kind of the
hardcore
stuff
for Buster.
You don't think Buster's kind of a hardcore kind of guy? You're right. He really does give off a ska energy. He's listening to like Big Real Fish or something.
The Mighty Mighty Bus Tones.
Yeah. You know that Fern is listening to like Car Seat Headrest or like Mount Erie, just the most emo music that we could completely think of.
Bauhaus, the Sisters of Mercy, some like old school goth stuff.
That's true.
Joy Division.
And you know that Sue Ellen's listening to like world music.
Sue Ellen's a big Arrested Development fan.
Oh,
the hip hop group Arrested Development.
I see.
Just big up with Mr. Wendell.
Who else? Binky listens to, and all the Tough customers just listen to like tough guy hardcore. Like they're listening to like Gorilla Biscuits. That's what those guys are into. They're into Bane is what they're into. They're into wearing heather gray hoodies and talking about the scene.
Or maybe like Onyx if you want something a bit more 90s.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to get a little bit, if you want to get more hip hop with it, definitely Onyx is fitting. Or like Limp Bizkit, really, if we want to even get late 90s.
Yes.
You know, Gen X.
It's just one of those days, Binky, when you don't want to wake up. You know?
It's true.
One more I'll say with DW. She seems like very like female, women rapper. Like I could see she's listening to like Cardi and
Princess Nokia or something. I could see DW to me, even though she would probably be a millennial if we're acting like the timeline starts in the mid 90s. But you know, in DW in the modern context, I get a Gen Z vibe. You know, DW's listening to that hyper pop, that 100 gex.
Yeah, no, dude, the Tibbles are listening to 100 gex.
Yeah, the Tibbles are bumping Stupid Horse up and down the street for sure, bothering all the neighbors.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of our ideas. Feel free to send us yours. And, of course, thank you to the anonymous emailer, elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. We also want to say a quick thank you to our patrons. Patreon.com/elwoodcitylimits. Our most recent episode of For the Kids seems to have gone over pretty well. It's all about Whimsy's house. We had an interesting time talking about that, and we have a patrons poll up right now. By the time you're hearing this on Friday or the weekend, you have until the end of day on Sunday, the 17th, July 17th, to vote for one of our options. We'll talk more about your options near the end of the show. We have some new patrons on deck, such as Chloe, Dear Miss Elizabeth, a.k.a. Z, Wasatch Wind, who has already been very active on the Discord. Nice to make their acquaintance. And Grace Cole. We also have, as specially requested, Flying Sparks 32, also very active on our Discord. And we also have patrons like Cat Dog, Jeff L., Jeffrey Norris, Rory Forever, Veronica Tram, Casey Cosmos. who I enjoy following on Twitter. We have Vinny Cataldo and Owen. We have Revd. We have Rachel Pearson and Ross Ward. We have Stella, Froppy, and Emily K, the classics. And we have even more populating on our third page. Let's go with Light Relentless. Thanks, everybody, for supporting us at patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. I think we knew this going into it. In case you couldn't tell, this is a double dose of DW, and I was a little bit like, we haven't been loving the DW episodes in the past, so like having two of them, I don't know about this. So we're starting off with DW Queen of the Comeback, which actually starts with Arthur. He's talking about moments in his life that he wishes he could live again and again. Specifically, he mentions moments that have happened on the show, and they actually get reanimated a little bit. They don't cut to old footage. They like reanimated, like Arthur getting the sword in the episode with the rival school at the medieval fair, or Buster going on the balloon ride with his dad. Arthur's usually pretty quick. The show is usually pretty quick to use like stock footage or like past footage, so I was surprised that they just did it again, just in the new style.
I bet it's because the style is changing so much now that I feel like it would we would notice it more than it had in the past. In the past, like the animation was close enough that it probably we wouldn't notice it, but with the new style, it probably behooved them to reanimate these moments. But it's extra fun, given that, because before we might be like, oh, it's cool that they're referencing these things, but it's kind of lazy because we're just seeing the same clips again. So it's nice to see them, I don't know, from a new angle. Like the hot air balloon, when Buster's dad takes him up in the hot air balloon, looks incredibly different than it did the first time. And yeah, it's just fun to go down memory lane with this stuff. They could have come up with totally new moments that would be more applicable to the show's audience as this was airing. The moments they're referencing are now like, over 10 years before this episode aired, so it's kind of interesting that they picked these ones, but it makes the show's lore feel consistent and lived in and all that kind of stuff.
And you make a good point. It could be very much that some of the episodes they want to draw from are like in a completely different, like standard def versus HD, or like they would have to show it with the black bars around it or something. So that's a good point. I loved it. This whole cold open is framed around Arthur. It's the fall. Arthur doing like a jump into a leaf pile, and Pal does a little jump into the leaves too. There's a couple of really great, cute Pal moments, which I really appreciate.
And then palate cleanser for last week when you were like, you know what, I don't mess with Pal anymore.
No, but Pal, when he doesn't talk, I love little puppy Pal. Arthur also mentions one of like Mr. Ratburn's moment he wishes he could live again and again, which is giving a pop quiz, which he says, "I will cherish this moment forever." And he goes to talk about a moment that DW will want to relive, and it's when she got one over on the Tibbles. And she says, nothing tastes as sweet as revenge. So that's the idea going into this episode, that she one time got one over on the Tibbles in some regard. But it doesn't start there. It starts off with DW getting a bad haircut at a place called Signore Palato's, which it seems to be clown-themed, this barbershop.
Okay, so first of all, just when I thought we were going to get some decent Italian-American representation in Arthur. You know how much I'm like, Pepe, the Italian flea, he bugs me so much with his stupid voice. Oh, goodness gracious. Mamma mia, as we would say.
Here we go again.
Oh, fun, DW's got an Italian barber. And lo and behold, he messes up her haircut, which, come on, the guy's a professional. I just don't see this happening. I think this is ridiculous.
How would you describe the way that he messes it up? Like, I think you're better at physically describing what he does wrong here.
I mean, he like chops off a big chunk of her front bangs, really. Like,
and then afterwards, like, what does her hair look like as you would describe it?
Oh, after he like kind of tries to fix his mistake. Well, this situation's funny for a couple reasons. First of all, yeah, it's like a kid's Italian barber shop, so like DW's in like a chair ride and he's wearing a clown nose.
Right.
But the whole gimmick is completely lost on her. DW says, if you're a clown, what are you doing at a barber shop?
She really side eyes him, and Mom Reed has to like apologize, like she's usually not this bad. But this guy seems to like suck. Like not only is the decor, it's like a clown thing. Maybe it's just like a thing he does for kids, but even still, like it looks stupid. And then he offers DW a sugarless lollipop, to which I was like, screw you! Like this place sucks. Get me out of here.
But yeah, he chops off the front of her bangs, and then we have this moment where he goes, this is one thing you never want your barber to say, is he goes, oh no, which is really, really bad. And it reminded me of the TikToks where it's like there's a kid sitting in the barber's chair and the whole barber shops is like brainstorming on how to fix his haircut. Like there's like 5 guys surrounding this one kid being like, okay, we could do, put the number 3 on top and then you do the skin fade here. And the other guy's like, no. And I was like, oh, we messed up. We got to go bald with the DW because he chops off a huge portion of her front bang. And then the next time we see her, it is like a pixie cut. Like he gives her kind of like, I would say a pixie cut, like a really kind of DW would describe as tomboyish, completely kind of cuts off the sides. And this is why for the rest of the episode, the Tibbles call her Dennis. Because it looks like a boy's haircut.
Well, right. It's actually kind of modern for women today to have this haircut in fashion. I want to mention we did get a brief appearance from Nadine, which, as we discussed in a previous episode, it seemed like they were going to try to get away from, of like, oh, Nadine's not going to be around forever, but she does appear to a couple of times in this episode to help DW. In this case, kind of get her a little bit relaxed as the haircut goes on. But yes, DW gets this awful haircut, and she tries to wear a hat, like a toque, a woolen winter hat, to make sure the Tibbles don't make fun of her. And Emily even can't stop herself from laughing at the hair. DW is going to claim that she has keratosis, which is why she needs the hat. But as you said, the Tibbles see her, and then the whole thing is that they keep teasing her. Of course, it's a boy haircut, and they at first call her David Reed, but then settle on Dennis Reed, DW's brother or cousin or something. And just DW, she doesn't have a good comeback. She keeps wanting to say something, and then it comes to her later. She has the delayed reaction. Like at one point when she gets back home, she asks Arthur, like, what do I say? And then Arthur gives her a couple things to say. So she goes back the next day. This is 24 hours after the burn has already set in on DW. And she says, I know you are, but what am I? Like free of context. And then just basically opens herself up to more. And this is
there's a really good moment where she says, I know you are, but what am I, to nobody. And then that doesn't work, and so she asks the Tibbles to say something about her, and the Tibbles say, you're so smart and funny. And then she says something else, like it's similar to, I know you are, but
she
what
says,
am I?
I'm rubber, you're glue, whatever you say bounces off of me and sticks to you, which to me, it's like, that was always kind of weak anyway, but since they said a nice, they said a nice thing to her,
I guess, yeah.
Exactly, so they got her like twice. They own her at this point. It's crazy. I also wanted to note, so there's this scene where DW is very, as I said, she's talking to Arthur about what she can say to the Tibbles. She's very upset. She even says to Arthur at one point, this is all your fault, which is completely baseless. This is the first time that Arthur's appearing in the story. And Pal, I wanted to note, this is so adorable. He's such a good boy. He doesn't even cry when he gets his nails clipped, which I know that for a lot of dogs, that's one of the harder things that you have to do. I know that they can give you a lot of guff for that, but Pal doesn't even so much as bark. So he's a real good boy. I also wanted to mention here when DW is doing those 2 failed insults, she does the, I know you are, but what am I? Then she goes to the corner of the sandbox where she and the Tibbles are, and Nadine is acting as her, like, boxing corner man to the point where she gives DW a pail to spit into as she goes back out to try the other insult. I thought that was a funny visual thing.
You know what? I'm glad you caught that. I didn't realize. I was like, why is DW spitting? Like, it makes sense, though, that she's, like, hyping her up.
She's going in for round 2.
Which she, again, fails.
And then she also outsources advice from Rattles and Binky, to which I think this counts as an Arthur meme alert. I'm pretty sure I've seen this as a text post. So, DW says that you're supposed to have good comebacks. You're bullies. And Rattles says, We're not bullies. We're kids who have a hard time expressing our emotions in a constructive manner.
This whole exchange is by far the funniest part of either of these episodes today.
It was very good.
It's that line is brilliant. And then Binky chimes up and he's like, you should call them a bibliophile. And Arthur's like, that just means someone who's like really into literature. And Binky's like, I just like the way it sounds. Bibliophile. And then they like start yelling these words. Rattles and Binky yell these words at each other that they don't know what mean. Like, one of them is like, philanthropist.
And then Rattles says humanitarian. Rattles also calls him an autodidact, which is a self-taught person. Just very, very funny. I think we've all done that. You discover big words that nobody else knows and you use them as insults. So DW is still trying to figure out the best comeback here. We cut to Grandma Thora and Mrs. McGrady, who are at Mrs. McGrady's place. We get a reference here. So Mrs. McGrady is making some Indian food, and she references the fact that she has gotten over cancer. She says, like, I haven't been able to cook like this since before I was sick, or something to that effect. So, you know, that's still, again, part of the background canon of it all. Grandma Thora's advice, which I rolled my eyes at, but I know it's somewhat true. It's just also, like, one of the least helpful things to say in the moment to somebody who's being bullied. Just ignore them. I'm like, ugh.
Well, I mean, it's different when it's bullying, though, and it is someone, like, chirping you, right?
Sure, yeah.
And I think that is the distinction in this episode, is, like, the Tibbles aren't, you know, actively making DW's life a living hell or anything like that. They're her friends at the end of the day. It's just that they're getting their chirps in, and DW's got nothing for them. And it's true that, I mean, the episode gets into it near the end, but the moral is that if you stop caring, you know, you win in the end by being the bigger person, because you're not reciprocating with their barbs, so to speak. But DW hasn't learned that lesson yet. She needs like ancient Indian wisdom to learn that lesson.
It's like a reverse Shoresy. It's like DW is both Jonesy and Riley, and then the Tibble twins are both Shoresy, and they just can't stop chirping her. And she doesn't have anything. So, yeah, I rolled my eyes at that advice, even though we kind of end up in that place anyway. And I think that there is a kernel of truth to that. It's just that, yeah, I've heard that just ignore them to brush off anything from verbal insults to, like, physical assault. So I'm just like, bad relationship with that. So Mrs. McGrady does give DW like a snappy, it's almost like a Dusty Rhodes promo that she does at her. It's like rhyming or like a Muhammad Ali-ism. And DW is like, oh, let me memorize that to say back to them.
Miss McGrady had you know, bars back from the Great Depression or whatever, the mean streets of the early 20th century. It's not, you know, this fair weather, wimpy, millennial kind of talk from Binky and Rattles. This is some hardcore stuff Mrs. McGrady retained from the early 20th century.
So Mrs. McGrady tells DW a fable from the Panchatantra, which is an ancient Indian collection of fables, and this is real. It's a separate segment, essentially, not a segment, but it's like a, you know, an imagination sequence, and it's done in the style of, I can't exactly place the type of artwork, but it's meant to be in line with the type of fables. Like it is. The only way I can describe it, it's like, it looks like a fable, but that's not descriptive at all, so I apologize. Maybe, Lucas, you'd have a better idea, but I'll just say that
it's like tapestry-esque.
Tapestry,
you know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. That's much better. So the story is that, like, a tortoise is friends with two birds. I believe they're seagulls, if I'm not mistaken. And all three of them are friends, and then the lake dries up. So the tortoise needs to go somewhere else in order to live. And the gulls offer to fly the tortoise, but the problem is the tortoise is very chatty, in a way that almost sounded like a bit of a Jewish stereotype at times, but it's like, okay.
He's kind of, for lack of a better term, he's kind of like a nebbish, kind of like nervous, like, oh, can you guys turn down the air conditioning, like, I don't know if it was just, I don't know if it's necessarily a Jewish stereotype, so to speak, as much as it is like nervous, like New Yorker. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
it's within that. Like, I don't think there's really anything wrong with it, but it's like, depending on how you play it, you can get a little close to Jewish stereotype, and it's not quite that, but it's like, yeah, He's just complaining about everything and just like, how long is it going to take for me to get over there? There's a funny one where he's like, they're going to carry him over because the tortoise has to bite down on a stick that the two birds will lift him to another place, and he says that's like, that stick doesn't look very strong. You should have gotten oak. Oak's much better. I know a beaver who gives me great oak, and it just sounded like it sounded like a euphemism for like a dealer or something. Just like, oh yeah, I gotta phone my beaver. He gives me great oak. So they fly the tortoise, and on the way, a duck who's a real jerk starts appropriately chirping the tortoise, and when he opens his mouth to retort, the tortoise fell. And that's
the duck is really doing some like Jerry Seinfeld-esque material at the tortoise too.
Observational humor.
Yeah, I don't blame the tortoise for getting mad, because it's like, oh, is that a stick shift? Because it's got a stick in his mouth, or like,
you look like a UFO being towed.
Yeah, I would say it's some fairly broad barbs, not the most biting material, but yeah, annoying if you're in air travel nonetheless. I have to sit here and listen to this duck. But yeah, the tortoise. By the way, there's this weird moment where Mrs. McGrady doesn't really finish the story.
Right.
It's obvious to us, the viewer, that the tortoise falls to their death and dies. We almost had our second on-screen death in Arthur, but of course they cut the story short. Mrs. McGrady gets and this Zoom wasn't around, so I assume a Skype call from her sister in India. So it cuts off the tortoise's horrific end, where he goes splat on the ground. But I just thought it was funny that it was like they tried to have their cake and eat it too. Like, the obvious end of that story is that the tortoise dies, but they go to great lengths to not show it or acknowledge that that's what even happens.
And
then we get this Skype call. It's funny. They replicate bad internet connection.
Yeah, so Mrs. McGrady gets a call from her sister, who is in Bodh Gaya, India. We also see a cameo from El Boomerang during this video call. And you're right, they simulate like early 2010s video call lag in a way that like you're not really getting a full motion video. You're getting more just like stuttery pictures of every couple of seconds. I thought that was a really good touch. That night, since DW didn't hear the end of the story, she kind of dreams up her own ending, where the tortoise and the duck show up in her room, and she imagines them being chained together forever, and essentially they're in this stalemate, this mutually assured destruction of if one teases the other, then the other one will tease them back, and it just goes in this recursive loop for the rest of time. And this ends up sticking to DW in a way, and this is how she ends up dealing with the Tibbles. So she goes to school the next day, and she heeds the advice of the story, or at least the advice she dreamed up. They insult her, they call her Dennis again, and then DW just goes to insult them and then takes a deep breath and says, "It's not worth my time. Call me whatever you want. I really don't care." And then walks away. It's cold as hell. I liked it. Very good.
And see, Will, this is where, Grandma Thor's advice actually works, because you feel like the wind go out of the Tibble sails. Like, they've lost their power over DW once she's decided to be the bigger person and just simply not care about the things that they say. And then her hair grows back and all is well.
And it's very true. Like the core of that idea is that a lot of, from bullies to people teasing you, they want attention. And
reaction.
A reaction, exactly. And if you give it to them, then they're emboldened to keep doing it. But if you stonewall them, or if you're able to stonewall them, then they just will move on, or at least theoretically. It's not a one-size-fits-all sort of thing. And then we go back to actually the framing device of the cold open, where DW has been relating this story, and she names her method as keeping the stick in the mouth. So just letting the insults wash off you and acting as though you're better than it. And in this case, yeah, totally worked. And in a lot of other cases, it's something that I think a lot of people on Twitter.com could heed from time to time. And I'm certainly guilty of it myself. Before we move on to our second story, and now a word from us kids.
So this one's kind of tangentially related. It's in that, the first episode we just watched had an Indian folk tale, and now we hear a Japanese folk tale.
I imagined it was just, within the context of like exploring another culture's traditions. And yes, So a woman named Yumi goes to a group of students and tells them a Japanese folktale using the art of kamishibai, which is paper theater. Essentially, it's creating sequential illustrations to communicate a story, and all of the kids get to do their own by taking a folktale and then drawing sequential drawings like a group project. The only thing I really have to say about this is I like seeing the differences in artistic ability of the kids. And again, this is not to insult or to really even to praise, but it's like you can tell from the drawings themselves of like, oh, this kid might grow up to be like artistic, or this kid really likes to draw. And then there's other kids who have a little bit more trouble with it. It's just like, okay, well, drawing isn't their strength. And it's just interesting to see it at a very early time in their life. All right, so we're going to get into the second half of this episode in just a moment, right after this. This podcast is supported by listeners like you, and here's how. Over on our social networks, you can follow us and find the latest updates and some fun photos. Facebook.com/Elwood City Limits, at ECL Podcast on Twitter, ElwoodCityLimits.tumblr.com, and Elwood City Limits on Instagram. You can support us monetarily by going over to patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. If you become a patron for as little as $1 a month, you get access to exclusive audio content like our new PBS Kids show, movie reviews, and sneak previews of upcoming content. Support us as well by going to teespring.com/stores/Elwood-City-Limits-store or search Elwood City Limits on Teespring. Buy yourself a t-shirt, a tank top, or a hoodie with the Elwood City Limits logo or an exclusive design by our friend Josh. Elwood City Limits is available online at libsyn.com/Elwood City Limits, where you can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. Is it not on your favorite app? Let us know, and you can always help us by spreading the word, tell your friends, and send us a message either on social media or an email, elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. Thank you so much for your continued support. And now, let's get back to the show. So if this one sounds familiar to you, if you've been listening to Elwood City Limits for a couple of years, in My Africa, we did kind of cover this. So I did an episode of ECL Flash Forward, which is when we go forward in the Arthur timeline to talk about an episode that's either relevant now or that we just wanted to cover. So I talked about In My Africa with a lovely person named Kara Oliver. The episode is from, I believe it's May or June of 2020. And you can listen to it now. We talk about the episode more in broad strokes, and Kara has some really great insight on it. She talks about the work that goes into anti-racist action. She talks about what the episode gets right from an educator's perspective. I'd really encourage you to listen to the episode for her more than me. So I'm going to be like, I listened to it again. I wanted to make sure I don't repeat myself here. So Lucas, I'll be very interested in what you observed from this episode. And this, as I said, is another DW episode. She does the cold open from a bustling city. Then she wonders if maybe we can guess where it is, and it turns out it's in a part of Africa, Dakar, Senegal. It seemingly could be anywhere in the world.
Her bait and switch worked on me. She's like, I'm in a bustling city. I'm like, Elwood City.
Really?
Like,
even if it's called In My Africa, you're just like, oh, Elwood City, yeah.
I don't know. I'm just like letting this episode wash over me. I'm barely paying attention. And then I'm like, she's like, DW's like, I'm in a bustling city. And my like lizard brain just like, Elwood City. Just as an initial response. And then she's like, no, I'm in Africa. And I'm like, wow, I've learned something today. But yeah, no, I actually thought this was a great cold open. Both, you're right, as an educational device of like, ooh, why don't we subvert your expectations? Maybe if you're a kid watching this at home and you're much like DW, think Africa's all savanna and lions and huts and there's nothing else. We'll start off with saying, no, there's bustling cities, just like everywhere else in the world. And then we kind of get this really good character introduction of DW's new friend, her new classmate.
Her new classmate and friend is Cheikh, who is from Senegal, and we see him in the cold open playing with El Boomerang. So it makes his cameo again. Where's it going to end up? We're going to find out very soon. I also wanted to note Cheikh is in this episode is played by a Canadian actor, an award-nominated actor named Thamela excuse me on the pronunciation, Thamela Mpumlwana. So I really thought his voice was quite distinctive. So the idea behind this episode, really in broad, this is a more straightforwardly educational episode than we tend to usually get on Arthur. So the idea is that Cheikh is a new friend of DW's, and he's the Brain's cousin who is moving from Senegal to Elwood City. We see him begin his journey by leaving his home in Senegal, and we even see a little shot of, I'm guessing it's meant to be his mother, and I really liked seeing African fashion represented on the show.
Well, we also do the Indiana Jones shot where it's like the plane going from Senegal, and let me tell you something. They got a direct flight from Senegal to the New England area. Like, good for what a deal. There was no connecting flight or anything, just across the Atlantic Ocean. Here, if we had to fly anywhere, we got to fly to Toronto first in the opposite direction. So
yeah, you're right. I didn't even think about that, but man, that must have also been like, you're flying over an entire ocean. That must have been like at least a day, right? I mean, I don't know. I don't know much about air travel, but that must have taken forever. So the idea is that Cheikh is part of DW's preschool class, and she makes a drawing about what she thinks Africa is like, and she's a bit embarrassed when Cheikh says that it's not like that at all. Like, DW is like, oh, there's lions and trees, and you take the hippo to school. And I said this in the episode with Kara, and I'll say it again. Great line here when Cheikh says, "Where did you learn this nonsense?"
And DW replies in turn with, TV.
TV and movies, mostly. And then Timmy Tibble totally razzes DW, just like, you don't know anything about Africa. Just like, you don't know how to not eat glue, Like, of all people being razzed by Timmy. And, like, Sheikh's nice about it, but he just very pointedly is just like, that's not what Africa is like. And DW resolves to learn all about Africa, which is going to be very hard because as something that she is taught, and I actually made this mistake when I was like making my notes, even after they said this, of like the country of Africa, just like, actually Africa is not a country. It's made up of many different countries. And DW is like, oh man, there's so much of this I still have to learn.
Well, DW's teacher gives great advice, and this is kind of the crux of the episode. They kind of give away the moral early on, but DW's teacher says, you should learn about a place before you describe it.
Exactly. So DW, of course, can't read, so she can't get the information that way. She does. We do get a little bit of help here from Arthur, who enlists the Brain to her cause, because Arthur went through this very similar process himself, just over the course of 12 minutes in Dear Adil. He references learning about Turkey. So we have done this a little bit, but we're at least going about it in a different enough way, and with a different character too. So DW enlists the Brain to help her to learn, and the Brain's trying to figure out the best way to impart this knowledge. And DW happens upon the idea of creating a song. And this song is the centerpiece of the episode. We hear the whole thing. It's almost 5 minutes long, and it needs to be, because it's a song about the various countries and parts of Africa, and it's called In My Africa.
54 things, 54 things to see and to explore in my Africa. Whoa, 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 in my Africa. Whoa, whoa, whoa. The continent of Africa is deep and long and wide, with 54 countries to keep my song diversified.
There's rhythmic beats, new things to eat, and places you can go. And every day, a different way that you can say hello. For instance, Mangaboo is howdy do when visiting in Ghana. Dumelama is how you say hello inside Botswana.
Yeah, this was great. Once I realized that this is what they were doing, I got excited because it's reminiscent of It's one of my favorite bits in Animaniacs of all time is when they do the countries of the world, and he like runs down all the countries. And it's funny because that video is kind of out of date because a lot of those countries have changed names or what have you. But I think it's kind of a timeless Animaniacs bit. And you know me, Will. I have a passing interest in geography. I play GeoGuessr in my free time because I just thinking about different countries and their different flags and where they are in the world. And so I was like, oh, great, this is like extra GeoGuessr. You know, one of my two biggest GeoGuessr blind spots, and I'll shamefully admit it here. I'll leave my heart open to the listeners to know my faults, are definitely continental Africa. As well as like the Pacific Islands. Whenever a country's in those places, that's where I always find it to be the hardest because I really don't know a lot about those areas or the geography of those areas. So I was keenly studying this song, Will, because I was like, okay, these places are near the Nile. These places have like this body of water. This is useful GeoGuessr information for later on.
I'm useless with geography, so a lot of this was very much new. Like I've heard some of these places of names before. So the entire song is sung by DW and Brain's voice actors. They're not the amazing singers, but it is a fun and engaging way to learn. Although it does just boil down to they go to like each region, they say its name, and then they give like one fact without context. And it's like,
and they do cheat a little bit too. Like for instance, they will assign certain facts to multiple regions, and then at the end they do just kind of throw in all the countries that they didn't have anything for. Like at the very end, there's just like 5 countries that are used as ad libs that they just kind of say over the end of the song, and it's like, okay, you listed them, I guess.
Yeah, and some of the facts that we give are just like this is meaningless. Like this doesn't really mean anything to me. It's like I'm sorry, I don't remember the lyrics. Maybe I should pull them up here. But it's just like this is the land of something something. I'm like I don't know what that means.
Yeah, this is the place where people stand tall. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, what does that?
What does that mean?
But
like,
it is.
Are they tall people from here? They have good posture. What is that?
Yeah. Past Uganda, Eritrea, and look out, a crocodile. Okay, like, yeah. Some of them are interesting facts, but others are just like I have no idea what to do with that. But the song sounds good, which I think is important. They do also use a lot of live action pictures and footage with the little music video that they have. And it really, it sells Africa. I think it's, Africa is such a beautiful part of the world, and it's really cool. I always appreciate seeing footage from its various places. I just think
the
really
inclusion of the live action footage almost makes this feel like a secret Postcards from Buster episode. Besides the fact that Buster's, of course, not in it, it feels very Postcards from Buster-esque, even more so than an Arthur episode, in terms of kind of the way the episode is formatted, because once they get this song idea, with a few little siestas, it is basically this song for the rest of the episode. They have kind of like 3 sections. The first section, they're introducing the song and they're running down some of the countries. And it's funny, I was thinking to myself, I was like, wait, they're done? They didn't get to all 52 countries. There's still some to go. And then Chake comes back in and says like, oh, you should add a food section. And this is kind of my favorite section because I like seeing all the African food. I don't know if you had the African food place here, Will. Barry's African Cuisine. This is, again, we're a Halifax podcast. This is a Halifax travel podcast, folks. Barry's African Cuisine is absolutely delicious. It's like if you're really, really hungry, it's one of the best filling meals you can have for $15 here.
Ooh, yeah.
But so they kind of have the song, and then they have little inset moment, and then they go back to the song. But really, 2/3 of this episode are this song.
Yes, they stop the song at one point as Chake comes in, and he's quite impressed by it, and he adds a little bit of his own knowledge about Africa, about food, and other parts of the continent, because he mentions earlier in the episode, and then he treats DW and Brain to poulet yassa, which is a Senegalese dish that is spicy lemon chicken, which Sounds pretty good to me, man. I also want to make this note here. So I looked up the full song on YouTube. And in the comments there, apparently some people were a little upset because this song was made before South Sudan was a country. And people were like, where's South Sudan? It's like, okay, this is like put not only was this released in 2010, it was probably written in like 2008. So like it's not going to be completely up to date with Africa. I'm sure by now it's even more out of date. But well,
that's true with kind of all geography stuff, right? Like there's that guy on TikTok who could figure out when a globe was made based off the information of the globe, and he usually gets it within a few months because things are always changing. It's just it's funny reading now. I found the video you're talking about and they have the lyrics all written up. It is really just interesting to see, like, okay, what are the things that they highlight about every single country, because it's a really impossible task, because summing up one
oh my God, this
country,
must have been so hard to do.
Well, summing up one country concisely is really difficult, let alone, okay, what is
a
the
continent.
most important thing about each one of these 52 countries, and also we kind of have to make it rhyme.
Yeah, like the line we were talking about earlier was, and Burkina Faso is called the land of upright men. So that's that again. What? But then they've moved on to the next lyric. And as you said, this is a lot of the episode, because if you look it up on YouTube, the whole thing back to front is like about 5 minutes, and this episode itself is only 11 or 12, so that's almost half of it.
Oh yeah, the end. Yeah, the end is when they're just like Djibouti, Somalia.
So the episode basically comes together when DW is going to make a presentation of the song, and the song ends with another interlude here as she goes to perform it in class. She gets a bit momentarily embarrassed about singing the song, as the Tibbles are saying she's going to get it wrong again. Like, talk about the hippo bus. But then Shake gets up and sings with her, and she's not as embarrassed anymore. The episode finally ends up with Ms. Morgan introducing another new student, Keith from Kalamazoo. And DW says that she doesn't know anything about Kalamazoo, but she is very eager to learn about it. And that's what you're meant to take away, is that it's supposed to tell you about the positives of being a worldly citizen, let's say, of learning more about places you don't know about. Anything else before we get into the wrap up? This was a little bit of a different.
This is one of the shorter episodes of Elwood City Limits, but it's because the second episode, like I said, once you see the song, that's the grand majority of the episode. There's a little bit of context at the start, introducing Jake, but there isn't really much else to it besides the kind of song as the central element of the episode.
Yeah. So let's talk about both of them. First of all, DW, Queen of the Comeback. Lucas, what did you think?
You would think one of the things we've been critical of Arthur episodes in these later seasons is that some of them start to feel like we are retreading well-worn territory. And, one of the things that we've talked about on Arthur many times is, calling each other nasty names, bullying one another. We have classic Arthur episodes that tackle this, DW being called Dora Winifred, and her calling Arthur such a bad name that he melts. And then we watched an episode recently that was kind of covering the exact same territory about like mean names and that kind of thing. So you'd think I would levy the same criticism at this episode for being a little too samey, a little bit too well-worn territory. Right. But I thought that this was coming at it from a different angle. Of, the central message being DW needs to be the bigger person. Once that she lets the Tibble twins know that she isn't bothered by their comments, and she stops being so reactive to them, they're going to stop and they're going to leave her alone. And I thought the big standout thing about this episode was a DW episode for me really works when it's funny. DW is a great character to introduce a lot of good comedy with. She's one of those characters like Binky that's just kind of a quip machine. Like, it's great to put DW in a situation and have her kind of say something offside, right? That's something that Arthur doesn't have. Arthur's a great protagonist because to some extent, he is a blank slate. He is the perfect kind of figure for the audience to kind of put themselves in the situation. DW's not like that. DW's at her best when she is well written and she's quick and she's saying funny things. And I thought this was a really funny DW episode. I thought the situation with going to Binky and Rattles was some of the hardest I've laughed at an Arthur episode this season. I thought it was really funny. And just her kind of, she totally misunderstands the Indian story that Mrs. McGrady tells her. She's like, okay, so I'm not supposed to keep a stick in my mouth. Her just like complete lack of timing, like her inability to come up with these comebacks just as the Tibbles are roasting her. All these situations made me laugh, and I thought that it kind of made the episode greater than the sum of its parts. I think the moral works, and I think the humor works. So I was really entertained by this, despite it being kind of a lot of DW episodes in quick succession.
Yeah, I liked this one too. Like, again, I was very much like, it's, 2 DW episodes. And again, we're, the DW defenders over here. But again, it's just like, if this one's going to be like especially kiddie, I don't know. But I didn't think it was. I also thought that it was, funny and engaging. And it used a lot of like of the world. It didn't feel like a DW episode. It felt more like an ensemble episode at times, because you've got like different characters Arthur's age, different characters DW's age, different adult characters. And you were like coming up with interesting ideas and interesting ways to resolve DW's problem, and including like the fable, like, which was another like Arthur thing of like, let's just use a completely different art style and storytelling method. And it just kept it interesting through the whole time. And then when it was over, I'm like, oh, that's it? Like, that's it? Oh, my God. I thought this was going to go on a lot longer. It is. I was almost, I was like, I could have watched it for quite a bit longer. So, yeah, I liked it a lot more than I thought I was going to, for the reasons that you mentioned, Lucas, and for what I mentioned as well.
Before we move on, I forgot to mention that I also liked how, in the Fable, they took another chance to do a completely different art style. That's something I always appreciate when we have a story within the story in Arthur.
Big time.
And they do something adventurous. And, you can't fault how much work that is for the animators, right? Because, they have their assets that they use and their storyboards that they use and the characters that they've drawn again and again and again through these Arthur episodes. Right. So it's a ton of work to come up with like a totally different art style and just kind of animate a section that looks really different than the rest of the episode. So I always appreciate when they do that.
And in My Africa, so I've talked about this episode a little bit more. I'll keep this brief. I like the intention behind it. I think it's done from a good place. I like the song. I appreciate that they, included a new black character, a new African character, to do this. And I hope Shake comes back. It's one of those cases where it's like they introduce a new character from a new point of view. I hope that this isn't the first and last time that we see them. So I hope we do see Shake again. And yeah, a lot of the episode is the song, which I was really surprised about. The only thing is that, and this isn't really a complaint, it's just that, as I said before, you don't get Arthur being this like straightforwardly educational. Like, and you could even compare this to DW Queen of the Comeback, in which case, like, that is meant to impart a lesson, but it does it in a bit more of a complex way in terms of, what it uses for humor and all this kind of stuff. This is very much like, you're going to learn about Africa in this episode, which is good. Like, I think we absolutely should, and encourage kids to learn about different parts of the world. But it is very straightforward in that goal. It's like when you have the music video part of it is very non-diegetic in a sense of, it's like it's meant to address the person watching this. So it's interesting to see Arthur do that. Like, I'm glad it doesn't do that all the time. Every once in a while, it can get away with it, and I think this is totally fine. But, like, yeah, as an episode, the story itself is pretty threadbare. It's mainly just to get across the message itself. But the message is good, and the song is pretty catchy. So, yeah, like, I'm fine with this. I'm totally fine with this, and I like the intention behind it more than like the actual like meat and potatoes of the episode, I guess, the bones of the episode.
Yeah, I'm of two minds about this one because, I was entertained. I don't really have anything. I didn't feel like my time was wasted, and I have like I said, a little bit of an interest in geography. I just like hearing about all these different countries and seeing the sights from all these different countries. That's always going to be entertaining to me. But I don't know if it doesn't feel like an Arthur episode. That's the kind of one problem, is that the format, such a wide break from the format, does make it feel like a very, good episode of Postcards from Buster or something, but it doesn't have that kind of Arthur arc. It doesn't really feel like a complete Arthur story. It just mostly seems like set dressing to have this educational song, which again is executed really well. The song is good. The visuals that go along with the song is good. I even like the framing device. I love their introduction of the new character. I think all that stuff really works, but it just doesn't. It feels a little bit un-Arthur-like in a way. So I wouldn't count it as like one of my favorite episodes of, like, it's an episode I enjoyed, but I wouldn't put on my top 5 of the season list for that reason.
Yeah, I totally get what you mean, and I think we use that sometimes as a criticism of like, oh, any show could do this, and that's true. Like, there isn't a lot about this that is innately Arthur, but no other show did do this, or I shouldn't say that. There's probably other shows that have done this to a degree, but not a lot of shows that with Arthur's status, I suppose, would do this, and it did. So I think that there's points to be had there. My goodness, we're getting to the end of this season. Yeah, we're going to be ramping up to the end, which means that we've got some exciting stuff coming your way. So here's what the schedule looks like for the next little bit here. Next week on For the Kids, a PBS Kids podcast, which is our Patreon exclusive podcast where we talk about PBS Kids shows. We have a poll going on between two hotly contended choices. I won't tell you who's winning or what it looks like, but it's going to be another close one. So if you're a patron and you haven't voted yet, go to patreon.com/Elwood City Limits or check the link in the Discord in the ECL channel. Your choices are between Dinosaur Train and Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. Which one will win? The patrons will decide. End of day, Sunday, July 17th, is when you have to vote for one of those two shows. Make it a good one. Let's see which one wins and which one we'll be talking about next week. 2 weeks from now, we're going to be covering the last episode of Arthur Season 14, which is Buster Spaces Out and the Long Road Home. So we'll see what that's all about as we get ready. In August, it looks like we're going to be starting a new season of Arthur, Season 15, which is, well, okay, I won't get into it yet, but there's going to be changes coming very soon. Now, okay, let me be clear. We're not up to the Flash animation episodes yet, but we're closer than we've ever been. Well, with every episode, we draw a little bit closer. So enjoying the traditional animation while we have it. So we've got For the Kids next week. Then we have Elwood City Limits the week after that. The week after that, we will be getting you the ECL Season 14 recap and a very, very special ECL Presents coming to the Patreon feed. This is going to be huge. If you're... I can't wait for everybody to hear this one, and it's going to go to Patreon first. I'll give you a bit more details coming up in 2 weeks, but trust me, you've been waiting for this one. All right, Lucas, I'm going to go, since we're going to stop recording here, I'm going to turn the fan on and start to, eat a Freezy or something. I'm starting to melt here.
Yeah, no, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to stick my head into the freezer.
Well, don't get the icicles on your hair like DW did. Well, that's the end of another episode of Elwood City Limits. Thank you so much for joining us. My name's Will Young, and for Lucas Mancini...
Hey, you guys are from that Indian story.
We'll see you next time.